Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. This marks the beginning of the end for my series on 20th century boys. Naoki Urasawa's masterpiece on the meaning of growing up and heroism in the modern age, which I think is really a great take both on the coming of age tale and what it means to be a responsible adult. I want to start with four of our less important characters: Yukiji, Yoshitsun, Maro, and Acho, who are going to be the focus of this video. In my next video on 20th Century Boys, I will look at the protagonist and antagonist of the story separately. These four characters are important because they form the core group that surrounds Kenji's story. They are characters who reflect Kenji and whose interactions with Kenji shape who he is as a person. We're going to start with Yukiji. It's very tempting to think of Yukiji as the girl, or the romantic interest. She does kind of fill both of those roles, but that is not her most important purpose in the story. Yukiji represents regret. Now, 20th Century Boys is a story largely about male characters. You might guess that from the title of the series. It is also about coming of age in a very masculine way. It is about stepping up, taking responsibility for your place in your community, responsibility for your past actions, and responsibility for the future of the world as you wish to see it. As a result, it is not surprising that Yukiji is something of a tomboy. She leans more towards the masculine expression of femininity. She knows judo, she can roughhouse with the boys, she likes running around in the fields and riding her bike. She is a very active, energetic girl. A very common archetype in Japanese storytelling, and of course in Western storytelling. As is pretty common for tomboys, when she is young, Yukiji has a hard time being seen as a girl by her male friends. That includes, of course, Kenji and his group, and this causes her some trouble as she gets older because she becomes interested in one of them romantically, specifically Kenji. And so she develops a number of regrets about her relationship with Kenji specifically. She regrets being so harsh with him when she was very young. She regrets not being able to make that romantic connection when she got a little bit older. As the story goes on, she regrets that reconnecting with Kenji did not lead to that relationship again, even though her feelings had not really faded away. Other things always kept getting in the way. That was very rarely her fault, at least once they were adults. But that doesn't keep a certain amount of bitterness from creeping into Yukiji's life, especially after Kenji is presumed dead after Bloody New Year's Eve. It's particularly noteworthy that we only see this regret come out when Yukiji is dealing with parts of her life that Kenji has touched. She expresses regret as she tries to raise Kana. She expresses regret when dealing with the underground activities Yoshitsun takes part in. She expresses regret when she starts her own martial arts dojo in an attempt to keep her skills relevant as she grows older. However, when she's interacting with other people, like Maro, like Yoshitsun, like Acho, she seems to look back on her life with a great deal of satisfaction. It is only in her connection with Kenji that she has this bitter place in her heart that has grown out of all of the regrets she has built up over her life. Now, Kenji has a number of regrets in his life as well, probably the greatest one being the falling out that gave birth to his friend in the first place, followed by his failure to get his career in the band off the ground, and then his emotional estrangement from his sister. However, he also regrets the outcome of his relationship with Yukiji. He always knew there was a connection there, but he was never quite sure how to capitalize on it. It's not that Kenji was no good with women. We actually see him in a couple of relationships when he's in college. In fact, it is one of these relationships that becomes a barrier between him and Yukiji. By the same token, it is the dedication of these two people to overcoming these regrets that eventually allows them to reach a point where they can finally say, we will have a functioning romantic relationship, even if it doesn't happen until they're in their 50s, which is very unfortunate. But all through the story, when these characters are interacting with each other, and even when they are just thinking about each other, or carrying out their promises to each other, we see a real dedication to the idea that there was a special relationship that had to be maintained, even if it left a bitter taste in their mouth. And that commitment to maintaining the important relationships in life, even when they are not comfortable or fun, is an important part of being an adult. And this is one of the things that I think really pushes Yukiji beyond many of the other female characters Urasawa has written. She has a strong emotional arc in the story, as well as a very strong presence on the page that contributes to the overall theme of the story in a way that is both individually very impactful and ties together with the character arcs of every other character in an important and significant way. People in search of a mythical, strong female character could learn a lot from reading 20th Century Boys and paying attention to the development of Yukiji. Yoshitsun is another interesting character that ties very directly into the themes of adulthood that 20th Century Boys is grappling with. Yoshitsun is the one who protects the good things from childhood, so that they will still be there when people need a respite from adulthood. He is a teacher, an educator, and he's the one who has taken all of the lessons he learned as a boy and imparted them to the next generation. He creates continuity. He creates recognizable social structures. He has a very, very important role to the story, both as a character in a thematic web and to the plot as an actor in the world. It is fascinating to watch the development of Yoshitsun from a kind of wimpy, spineless, no-good boy to a character who is still insecure about himself, but sees there is something he must do, and finally into a character who is looked up to and admired by others, but still sees himself as a very minor figure. I think it's satisfyingly ironic to see that of the 20th Century Boys, the one who finally gets up and accepts the accolades of the UN is not Kenji or Acho, both of whom do a great deal to fight the machinations of the FDP, but rather Yoshitsun, who thinks of himself as the understudy, as the gopher, as the one who just has to hold out until all of his stronger, smarter, faster, cooler, older friends show up and help him out of the situation he's in. Yoshitsun is a character who saw what was good in life and dedicated himself to preserving and sharing the good he received from others. Not only is that a fantastically admirable thing about him, not only is that one of the most basic responsibilities of adulthood, but in fulfilling that responsibility, you are fit to stand on the same level as the people who claim to set the direction of the world. That is Yoshitsun's message, and it is presented beautifully. The fact that the kid that always relied on his friends for help when he was in trouble grew up to be the man everyone turned to when they needed help for their plans tells this story better than any monologue or exposition on his good points could. We can all see them for ourselves because Urasawa laid them before us with such painstaking care. Maro is a character who represents what Kenji could have been if he had a normal life. His character is particularly interesting because we almost always see him living something that looks like a normal life, unlike pretty much all the rest of Kenji's friends. First, we see him working at a small family business, which he owns for most of the 1990s before he answers Kenji's call to arms, and then we see him later on working as the manager for a musician. Maro is just a good guy who has a little bit of business sense and does his best to apply it in ways that help other people. Yes, he did briefly join Kenji's rebel terrorist cell, but Maro was doing normal person things for other normal people. Give or take Haru Namio. Yes, Haru Namio was a very well-known musician and kind of the leader of an underground movement, but really, Namio and Maro were just private citizens with very strong convictions who did their best to live them out until they reconnected with Yoshitsun. Maro represents how important it is to remain grounded in your regular life even when great challenges come upon you. Because if you lose those connections, you will lose what makes you who you are. We see that in Maro's internal conflict when he pays a visit to the FDP headquarters. Maro doesn't leave there alive because of some great moral revelation. He has already worked out the moral calculus time and time again. He chooses to leave because he sees that normal everyday life is still in effect at the FDP headquarters. They haven't gone completely off the deep end yet, like they will later in the story. It's this connection to everyday life that Kenji loses when he goes on the run and becomes essentially a terrorist. When I was discussing the end of 20th Century Boys, I said I thought it was an odd decision that the first person that Kenji reunited with was Maro. However, looking back on it, it actually makes a great deal of sense in retrospect. In the ordinary days, before Kenji's life was in danger, Maro was his closest friend. He is Kenji's connection to everyday normal life, and it is the need for everyday normal life that will eventually bring Kenji back into line with the rest of the group and allow him to finally put an end to the reign of terror the FDP are perpetrating. Once again, a well-executed character that plays into the thematic importance of the story while still standing on his own as a very deep and complicated character. Acho is an interesting contrast to that. Acho has already had all of the character arcs happen to him off-screen. He's pretty much one character when we see him as a kid, and a very different character when he is reintroduced as an adult. We get some flashbacks that give us an idea of what happened to him in between those two states, but in many ways he has already come of age. His drive and single-minded determination to do right by Kenji are the same drive and resolution he has when he is introduced to us in Thailand. Acho is not the leader that Kenji is. He does not have as strong an emotional connection to Kenji. But he is a dynamo, a person who makes things happen, and Kenji knows he needs people like that, which is why he takes all the time to track Acho down, even though he is so far away at the beginning of the story. Not only is Acho the right person at the right time, he recognizes when other people are the right people at the right time, and he's willing to step aside. Acho's confidence and sense of purpose is a thing that is very important to have, especially when times are tough. While Kenji does not have it to the same degree that Acho does, that is largely because he is dealing with a much more personal connection to the issue at hand than Acho. Acho is the reminder of the bigger picture that Kenji has to keep in mind when he is navigating the minefield of all his personal and emotional entanglements. It's not that Kenji's family and friends aren't important. Even Acho recognizes that and takes it into account as much as he can. Rather, Acho is the sense of priorities. He is the eye on the prize that every grown man needs to have in order to live a successful life. It's no surprise then that he is Kenji's right hand, the man who keeps him in check and on task, with the benefit of his supernatural clarity and focus that he has developed over years of training and discipline in his own personal emotional wilderness. While these four characters are not the only characters that shaped Kenji and made him into the hero he had to be in order to turn back the FDP and their machinations for the world, they are the core of his identity. Donkey, Mon-chan, Karo-yan, and many of the other kids that he met had a powerful impact on Kenji as well, but it is not an ongoing and perpetual impact on who he is over the course of the story. They don't serve to define the adult Kenji must become in order to save the world. These four characters do, and their prominence in the story is part of what makes it so powerful. But ultimately, these four characters alone are not capable of the great task that needs to be done. It's not until they are unified behind Kenji that the story can come to a close. So we'll take a look at Kenji and his great rival in the next video. Hopefully you'll come back for that. Let me know what you think of this down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use them as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.